I stood in the hallway, my cane pressing into the floor, staring at the bare white walls where my family photos used to be. Not one remained. We thought a fresh start would feel lighter, my daughter-in-law had said, as if removing decades of memories was just redecorating. My room was emptied, my quilt gone, my rocking chair replaced with a plant. After surgery, I came home to find I'd been erased by my own son and the woman he married. So I smiled, and quietly, I reclaimed the deed before they even realized it was missing. All right, before we dive into this crazy story, do me a favor, subscribe and tell us where you're watching from. The air inside the house smelled wrong. Too clean, too citrusy, not like the faint lavender and furniture polish Joanne always used. She hesitated at the threshold, her hand tight on the cane the rehab center insisted she bring. Behind her, the cab idled in the driveway, its engine grumbling in the cool Nevada dusk. From the front step, she could see into the living room, the one her husband had once painted himself, the color of coffee with too much cream. Now it was stark white, every picture frame gone, every cozy thing stripped away. The walls gleamed like a model home in a realtor's photo. She stood still, pulse quickening. "Travis," she called. Her son appeared from the kitchen, wiping his hands on a dish towel. His easy grin flashed, the same one that used to melt her whenever he wanted extra allowance. "Hey, Mom, you made it home. Look at you, walking already." Joanne smiled faintly, unsure how to fit her voice around the unease tightening her chest. "Where's my recliner?" "Oh, we moved some things around," Travis said. Lydia thought it was time for an update. Lydia's heels clicked against the hardwood as she entered. Her hair was immaculate, as if she were hosting a photo shoot rather than greeting her recovering mother-in-law. "Joanne, welcome home. You must be exhausted. We thought you'd prefer something modern, fresh start after surgery." Joanne's gaze drifted past Lydia to the mantel. The row of family photos, her wedding day, Travis's graduation, the picture of little Nathan holding a toy fire truck, all gone. The shelves were bare, except for a sculpted vase that looked expensive and heartless. Her voice came out thin. "Where are the pictures?" Travis shifted his weight. "Don't worry, we saved everything. Your stuff's in the garage." "Your stuff." The words landed like pebbles against glass. Lydia's tone sparkled falsely. "We turned your old room into a guest suite. It just needed some life. Wait till you see it." I picked a soft gray palette. "It's so calming." Joanne followed her down the hallway, her cane tapping against the gleaming floorboards. Each step echoed differently, hollow somehow. When Lydia pushed open the bedroom door, Joanne stopped short. The bedspread was new, white and textured. Her quilt, the one with her husband's initials embroidered on the corner, was missing. The dresser she'd used for 40 years was replaced by sleek, faceless furniture. A small decorative suitcase sat in the corner, as if waiting for some visitor she didn't know. Joanne's breath caught. "Where's my sewing chest? The cedar one?" "Oh, Travis moved it. He's been so helpful." Lydia smiled with too many teeth. "We thought a minimalist look would help you feel lighter." "Lighter," Joanne repeated softly, looking around the sterile space. The framed picture that always sat beside her lamp, her and her husband in Lake Tahoe, the summer before he passed, was gone. The lamp itself was gone. Everything that held a piece of her life had been swept away. Travis leaned in the doorway. "You're gonna love it once you settle in. We just wanted the house to feel a little more updated." Joanne turned toward the window. Outside, she could see the familiar roof line of Ellie's house next door. The curtains twitched. Ellie was watching, always watching. Good. She smoothed her sleeve, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "It's beautiful," she said. "Really." Lydia exhaled in relief. "See? I told you she'd love it." She gave Travis a wink before brushing imaginary dust off the nightstand. "We'll let you rest. Dinner's almost ready." Travis grilled salmon. When they left, closing the door softly behind them, Joanne stood alone, the silence pressed down like thick wool. She reached for the top drawer of the new nightstand and opened it. empty. Her fingers trembled as she pulled open the closet door. Her clothes were replaced with neatly arranged guest towels. In the garage, they'd said. She sat slowly on the edge of the two-white bed, feeling small in a room she had once ruled with memory and love. Every ache in her hip hummed in protest. Her eyes wandered to the corner where her rocking chair used to sit. It had been where she watched the sunset with her husband, tea cooling in her hands. Now, there was only a potted plant and a shadow where time had been erased. A truck rumbled outside. Through the curtain, she glimpsed movers unloading another box from a van. Ellie stood on her porch, arms crossed, her expression thunderous. Joanne met her friend's eyes through the distance, a silent exchange. Something's wrong. Ellie's chin dipped once, deliberate, as if saying, I see it too. Joanne's fingers tightened around her cane. The citrus-clean smell burned her throat. In the mirror across the room, her reflection looked older, smaller, almost erased, like someone halfway written out of her own story. But her eyes still glinted sharp beneath the exhaustion, and that was the first moment she knew. Whatever Lydia and Travis were planning, she would not be the one leaving this house. The garage light flickered when Joanne pulled the chain. The air hit her, dry, sharp, dust-sweet. It smelled like storage, not living. Cardboard towers leaned against the walls, labeled in Lydia's meticulous handwriting. Holiday decor, guest linens, mom's stuff, her stuff. Again. The cane tapped the concrete floor as she maneuvered between boxes. Her hip throbbed, a deep, stubborn ache, but she didn't stop. Somewhere in this mausoleum of things was the pulse of her real life, the one they thought they'd packed away. A faint hum from the freezer in the corner filled the silence. The garage was colder than she remembered. She passed a stack of picture frames wrapped in paper. Her husband's smile flashed briefly through the torn edge of one. She steadied herself against the wall and exhaled slowly. Then she saw it, beneath an old tarp, wedged behind a folded card table, the corner of a cedar strongbox. Her heart stuttered. She bent carefully, dragging it out into the open. The brass clasp was dull but unbroken. It had been her husband's idea decades ago, to keep everything important in one place. Paper outlives memory, he used to say. Her fingers traced the carved initials on the lid. J&M. The wood still smelled faintly of him. Joanne carried it to the workbench and flipped the latch. The lid groaned open, hinges complaining. Inside, neat manila envelopes lay stacked like soldiers. Insurance papers, car titles, their wedding certificate. And at the bottom, sealed in a plastic sleeve, the house deed. She slid it free and unfolded it on the table. The paper was thick, the typewriter ink faintly bled with age. Her husband's name, her name, not Travis, not Lydia. No other signatures. For a moment, her knees weakened with relief. The house was still hers. She pressed her hand flat on the deed, feeling its texture, like skin over a heartbeat. Then voices filtered faintly from the kitchen door. Lydia's bright tone carried through the crack. She's asleep already, thank God. We can start the flooring samples tomorrow. Joanne froze. Travis chuckled. We'll ease her into it. Maybe say it's just for maintenance. By the time she figures it out, Lydia said, it'll all be signed. The sound of the refrigerator door closing, footsteps receding. Joanne folded the deed gently, slid it back into the sleeve, then tucked the entire bundle into her overnight bag beside her pain medication and hairbrush. She zipped it closed and pushed it under a blanket in the corner of the guest suite, before returning to sit on the bed. Her pulse wouldn't calm. Every creak of the house felt like a question she hadn't asked. A sharp knock startled her. Joe? Ellie's voice. You home? Joanne's shoulders loosened. She shuffled to the front door and opened it halfway. Ellie stood on the porch, wind lifting her gray hair, a Tupperware container balanced in one hand. Brought chicken noodles, she said, her eyes sweeping Joanne's face. And I've got opinions. Joanne almost smiled. Come in before Lydia sees you. They went to the kitchen. The counters gleamed with Lydia's sterile touch. No clutter, no warmth. Ellie set the soup on the table and leaned against the counter. I saw movers here again this morning. And that white paint? Lord. It's like a hospital. Joanne stirred the soup absently. They said it was a refresh. Ellie's brow furrowed. No, honey. That's not a refresh. That's a takeover. Joanne hesitated, then whispered. They put my things in the garage, even the wedding quilt. Ellie's expression hardened. You're not visiting, Joe. You're being replaced. The words settled heavy between them. Joanne looked toward the hallway, where Lydia's framed modern art hung like silent judges. Her hand drifted to the pocket of her robe, where she'd stashed the key to the strongbox, now empty but for a few spare papers. She met Ellie's eyes. Then I'll replace their plan. Ellie blinked. What does that mean? Joanne straightened, a flicker of the old nurse's authority returning to her posture. It means I may walk slow, but my mind's faster than they think. Ellie's lips curved into a grin. Good, because I've still got my paralegal contacts at the county recorder's office. Outside, a door slammed. Lydia's laughter carried faintly through the evening air, light and cruel. Joanne didn't turn. She sipped the soup, the warmth spreading through her chest like strategy. Then maybe it's time I make a few copies, she murmured. Ellie raised an eyebrow. Of what? Joanne set the spoon down carefully, eyes narrowing toward the window where her reflection merged with the fading desert light. Of the only thing in this house that still has my name on it. The next morning broke pale and silent over Reno. A thin haze drifted from the desert, muting the sunrise into shades of brass. Joanne sat at the kitchen table, hands folded around a mug gone cold hours ago. The deed lay tucked inside her purse, the edge of its envelope brushing her palm like a secret that hummed. Travis and Lydia had already left, their voices and perfume lingering like stains. She'd waited for the garage door to close before calling Ellie. Now, 2 hours later, she stood outside the Washoe County Recorder's office, the building squat and sun-faded, its flag clapping lazily in the wind. Her cane clicked across the tiled floor as she entered, greeted by the low hum of printers and the smell of old paper and toner. Behind the counter sat Martin Reyes, silver-haired, glasses low on his nose, sorting a stack of manila folders. Joanne recognized him instantly. They'd volunteered together years ago at the hospital, back when she ran the night shift, and he helped with patient intake. Martin, she said softly. He looked up, squinting for a second. Then his face opened into warmth. Well, I'll be. Joanne Miller. Haven't seen you since the cafeteria chili crisis of 2008. She smiled, the first real one in days. You saved lives that night, he chuckled. Barely. His expression gentled as he noticed the cane, the faint pallor. How's the hip? Stubborn, like its owner. What brings you here, Ms. Miller? Joanne hesitated, then lowered her voice. I need to check the deed on my house. I believe it's still in my name. But I want to be certain. Martin nodded. All business now. He turned to his computer, typing quickly. The rhythmic clatter of the keyboard filled the space between them. After a few moments, he clicked his tongue. Here we are. Title's clean as a whistle. Still you and... He paused, softened his tone. And your late husband. Relief fluttered through her like a sigh. No changes? None recorded. He looked up. You want certified copies? 3, she said. 1 for me, 1 for a friend to hold, and 1 for... somewhere safe. He nodded approvingly. Smart. Most people wait until there's trouble. You're getting ahead of it. Not ahead, she thought. Just catching up. Martin printed, stamped, and signed each sheet with deliberate care. When he slid them across the counter, she reached for her wallet, but he waved her off. Senior discount today. She tried not to tear up. You always were a saint, Martin Reyes. He leaned closer. And you, Joanne Miller, were always 3 steps ahead of the chaos. Don't lose that. Outside, the wind had sharpened, blowing grit against her shoes, as she walked to Ellie's car, waiting at the curb. Ellie reached over from the driver's seat, lowering her sunglasses. "So, still your castle?" Joanne held up the folder. "Still mine," Ellie grinned, pulling into traffic. "Good, then we'll fortify it." They stopped first at Ellie's house, just 1 block away, the same beige siding and humming porch light that had been their landmark for decades. Inside, Ellie opened her hallway closet, dug out an old lockbox, and slid one certified deed inside. "Paperwork beats pity," she said with satisfaction. Their next stop was the downtown bank. Joanne handed another copy to the teller, who sealed it into a safe deposit envelope and slid it from sight. Watching it disappear, Joanne felt something return, a quiet authority, an anchor. By the time they got home, the sun was lowering, painting the stucco houses in gold. Lydia's SUV was in the driveway. Ellie's eyes narrowed. "Looks like the snakes are back." "Let me handle it," Joanne said, straightening her shoulders. Inside, Lydia was arranging flowers on the dining table, her voice sweet but pitched too high. Travis sat at the head of the table, scrolling on his phone. When he saw his mother, he smiled as if nothing in the world had shifted. "Hey, Mom. Lydia's office has this great deal on refinancing, super low interest rate. We could use it to update the house a little more, maybe fix the roof." Lydia added brightly, "It's in your name, so the bank just needs your signature to start. Easy peasy." Joanne eased herself into the chair across from them. She set her purse gently on her lap, the certified copies still warm from the clerk's machine. "Sounds complicated," she murmured, pretending to fumble with her napkin. "Not at all," Travis said. "It's just paperwork." She nodded absently, her expression soft, weary, exactly how they wanted her to be. "I'll let you two handle it," she said. "My head's still fuzzy from all the meds." Lydia smiled indulgently. "Of course you rest. We'll take care of everything." Joanne looked up slowly, her tone mild but her eyes cold and clear. "I'm sure you will." Lydia blinked, uncertain whether it was gratitude or warning. As the conversation drifted to dinner plans, Joanne sipped her water and felt something steady in her chest. Stronger than painkillers, sharper than fear. Inside, her spine felt newly forged, like steel cooling in fire. When Lydia laughed at something trivial, Joanne's gaze shifted toward the window. The desert wind had picked up again, rustling the rose bushes she'd planted years ago with her husband. Their thorns caught the light like tiny knives. She thought, "Go ahead, refinance there if you want. But the ground beneath your feet still belongs to me." And with that, she smiled. A small private thing that no one at the table understood yet. The next evening, dinner smelled of lemon chicken and calculation. Lydia had set the table as if expecting guests. Cloth napkins folded sharp as origami, wine glasses glinting under the kitchen light. Joanne knew the show wasn't for her comfort. It was for her compliance. She took her place slowly, easing onto the chair at the end of the table. Her hip ached, but she didn't let it show. Travis poured wine with exaggerated cheer. "To Mom's recovery," he said, lifting his glass, "and new beginnings." Joanne raised hers with a polite smile, though the word new curdled in her stomach. Lydia slid a manila folder across the table. "Speaking of new," Lydia said sweetly, "the bank just needs your signature to finalize the refinance paperwork. Nothing major, just verification." Joanne kept her hand still on her glass. "You want me to sign something?" Travis leaned forward, all easy charm. "Yeah, just a formality. It'll lower the interest rate and free up some cash for maintenance. We've been handling most of it, so it's easier if we streamline things." She reached for the folder, opening it slowly. The first page bore her name printed neatly at the top, but her eyes caught something odd. A faint line of initials, not hers, already scribbled in the margin beside transfer of interest. Her pulse picked up. She flipped to the next page. Legal jargon flooded the print. Clauses, stipulations, references to quitclaim and reassignment of ownership. Her gaze drifted to Travis. This is a quitclaim deed. Lydia's smile didn't falter, but her voice tightened. It's standard phrasing. They all look like that. Joanne looked at the pen Travis had laid beside her plate. A sleek black one from Lydia's office, its tip already uncapped. She took it, twirling it between her fingers. You know, these things always confuse me. I'll read it tomorrow when my eyes aren't so tired. Travis's charm flickered. It's really just routine, Mom, Lydia added too quickly. If we don't submit tonight, the rate changes. Joanne set the pen down beside her plate, the metal clinking softly against china. Then I suppose we'll miss the rate. The silence that followed was brittle. Lydia's jaw tightened just enough for Joanne to notice. Travis forced a laugh. You've always been cautious. No rush, sure. Good, Joanne said, closing the folder neatly. I'll sleep on it. She slipped the pen into her pocket before either of them could react. Can't sign without a pen, can I? Lydia tried to smile again, but it faltered halfway. Of course not. Rest up, Joanne. Joanne carried the folder down the hall as if it were fragile. When she reached her room, she locked the door behind her. She sat at the desk, lamp glow soft against the papers. The printed initials stared up at her, tiny, almost ghost-like. She traced them with her finger. Her hand shook, but not from fear, from rage so quiet it was almost dignified. A faint tap on her window startled her. She looked up to see Ellie outside, her silhouette framed by the porch light. Joanne opened the window just enough. You still awake? Ellie whispered. I never sleep when snakes are whispering, Joanne murmured. Minutes later, Ellie was inside, robe wrapped tight, reading glasses perched on her nose. Joanne handed her the folder. Tell me what you see. Ellie spread the pages across the bed, scanning line after line. Her mouth thinned. Well, well, someone's been practicing your initials. Joanne's stomach turned. You're sure? Ellie pointed to the faint scrawl. These aren't printed, they're scanned. Someone uploaded a signature image here. It's prep for forgery, Joe. They're getting ready to move your name off the title without you. Joanne sank back in the chair, the cane across her lap like a weapon she hadn't needed yet. I knew they were planning something. I didn't think it'd be this fast. Ellie closed the folder with a snap. Then we move faster. You said Martin still works at the recorder's office? Joanne nodded. Good. Tomorrow you tell him everything, and you register a trust. Your house, your name, every right you've got. That way they can't touch it even if they fake your signature. Joanne looked up, eyes sharpening. A trust. Exactly, Ellie said. They can't steal what's locked behind a wall of legal steel. Joanne smiled faintly, the expression strange and new, half relief, half vengeance. I used to tell my patients that prevention beats treatment. Ellie chuckled. Then this is your vaccine. A car door slammed outside. They both froze. Lydia's laughter floated faintly through the night again, joined by Travis's lower tone. Joanne's expression didn't change, but her fingers tightened on the folder. They think I'm still healing, she whispered. They have no idea I've already started building armor. Ellie leaned closer. Then let's forge it while they're sleeping. Joanne looked down at the pen she'd pocketed earlier. Its smooth barrel gleamed in the lamplight, mocking the signatures that weren't hers. She turned it slowly between her fingers, the weight of it solid and cold. By morning, she decided, someone else's ink would no longer define her house or her life. Morning light slanted across the kitchen floor, slicing through the blinds like thin gold knives. Joanne stood at the counter, steadying herself with one hand as she buttered toast she didn't plan to eat. Lydia's laughter still echoed in her ears from the night before, a laugh that sounded like ownership. Not today, she thought. By 8, Ellie's old Subaru rattled into the driveway. She honked once, short and sharp. Joanne grabbed her purse, slid the folder inside, and left without a word to the pair still upstairs. The Washoe County Courthouse loomed ahead, sandstone and authority. Inside, the corridors smelled of paper, coffee, and air conditioning fighting the desert heat. Joanne's cane clicked a rhythm of quiet purpose. Ellie walked beside her, expression all business. Martin Reyes spotted them before they reached his counter. Well, well, he said with a grin. I had a feeling I'd see you sooner rather than later. Joanne lowered her voice. You were right, Martin. There's trouble brewing. I need to protect the house, permanently. His smile faded. All right. What did they try? She slid the folder toward him. Martin flipped it open, his brow furrowing. Quitclaim deed, he muttered. Classic move. If they'd gotten your signature on this, they'd own half your roof before lunch. I didn't sign, Joanne said. He nodded. Good. Then we'll make sure you never have to worry about it again. Ellie leaned forward. She wants to create a trust, something airtight. Martin's eyes lit with recognition. You're talking a living trust. Strongest lock in the drawer. Joanne nodded once. Let's build it. They moved to a small conference room at the back of the office, fluorescent lights buzzing faintly overhead. Martin printed a packet thick enough to stop a bullet. He explained each step: trustee designation, successor clauses, beneficiary naming. Joanne read every line carefully, her finger tracing each word as if her life depended on it. When it came time to assign beneficiaries, she paused. Not family? Martin asked gently. She shook her head. No. I've seen what family can do when paper's involved. Her voice softened. There's a hospice foundation in town, St. Catherine's. They took care of my husband at the end. I'll name them, and me, as trustee. Ellie blinked, impressed. That's poetic and practical. Martin smiled faintly. Hospice as heir, you as gatekeeper. Smart. That means the property can't be refinanced, sold, or touched without your direct approval. Not by your son, not by anyone. Joanne signed each page with deliberate strokes, her hand steady. The final signature came with a quiet exhale, a sound like release. When it was done, Martin gathered the pages, notarized each one, and slid them into a secure envelope. I'll file this myself today, he said. Official within 48 hours. Joanne looked at the embossed seal, the ink still wet. It wasn't just paper, it was armor. Outside, the sky had turned the color of tarnished copper. The wind picked up as they walked to the car, scattering grit across the pavement. Ellie grinned sideways. You realize you just made yourself legally untouchable? Joanne's eyes narrowed against the wind. Then let them try. That evening, the house was full of voices again. Lydia was pacing near the dining table, phone pressed to her ear, laughing lightly. Yes, the refinance papers are ready, she said. We'll have Mom sign tonight. She's finally on board. Travis sat at his laptop, scrolling through listings of new flooring samples. Told you she'd come around. She's too tired to argue anymore. Joanne entered quietly, setting her purse by the door. Evening, she said. Lydia turned, masking her surprise with sugary enthusiasm. Joanne, we were just talking about the refinance progress. Oh? Joanne asked mildly, pouring herself a glass of water. It's progressing, is it? Travis chuckled, missing the undercurrent. Yep, should be finalized soon. You'll barely have to lift a finger. Joanne sipped the water slowly. Good to know, she said. Progress is a beautiful thing. Lydia tilted her head. You're in a good mood tonight. Joanne smiled faintly. I suppose I am. Sometimes the best kind of progress happens quietly, behind the scenes. Travis didn't notice the meaning. Exactly, he said. I'll email you the final form to sign tomorrow. I'll look forward to it, she replied. When they retreated upstairs, chatting about paint colors, Joanne lingered in the living room. The night outside was calm, streetlights washing the neighborhood in soft amber. She walked to the mantel where her family photos once hung. For a moment, she pictured them there again, her husband's steady smile, Nathan's gap-toothed grin. She didn't feel sadness this time. She felt possession. The next morning, a faint ding from her phone signaled a new email, Travis's subject line. Final refinance docs. Sign ASAP. Joanne chuckled softly and forwarded it to Martin with 2 words, already protected. That afternoon, Lydia appeared in the kitchen, her voice bright but brittle. The bank's confused. They said the property's suddenly under a trust. Did you? Joanne stirred her tea, the spoon tapping like a metronome. I did, yes. Lydia blinked. You what? I transferred ownership, Joanne said evenly, to a living trust. She met Lydia's stunned gaze. With me as trustee. Lydia's painted smile collapsed into silence. From the doorway, Travis appeared, face paling. You can't just— I can, Joanne said, setting down her spoon. And I did. The kettle hissed behind her, a soft, triumphant sound. She walked past them both, pausing just long enough to look over her shoulder. But don't worry, she said with quiet amusement. It's definitely progressing. By mid-morning, the house hummed with a kind of brittle quiet. Lydia's car was gone, and Travis had left early for a job site, his toolbox clattering like punctuation on his retreat. Joanne took her coffee to the porch, the sun already hot enough to sting through her sweater. She was halfway through her second sip when a white sedan rolled into the driveway. The door opened, and a man in a pressed shirt stepped out, clipboard in hand. The vinyl letters on his door read, Reno Valley Appraisal Services. Joanne's brow furrowed. He smiled awkwardly, walking up the path. Good morning, ma'am. Here for the property assessment. Assessment? She echoed. For what? He blinked. The refinance. Travis and Lydia Miller scheduled it. Joanne let out a slow, measured breath. So they're still at it. She rose carefully, setting her cup aside. You might want to take a seat, Mr. Hayes, he supplied. Tom Hayes. Well, Mr. Hayes, the house isn't for sale, or refinance, or anything else that involves someone signing my name who isn't me. His smile faltered. I'm sorry, ma'am. The paperwork looked official. Had your signature and everything. Did it now? He hesitated, glancing toward the sedan. Then, with the quiet shame of a man realizing he's been duped, he opened his folder and pulled out a request form. Here, he said, lowering his voice. I shouldn't show clients these, but you deserve to see it. Her eyes dropped to the page. There it was again, her name, typed neatly. And beneath it, the faint looping scrawl that pretended to be her signature. Joanne's stomach clenched. She traced the forgery with her fingertip, not out of disbelief this time, but confirmation. Would you mind if I took a picture of that? She asked evenly. He nodded quickly. I'm deleting my copy right after this. I don't want trouble. You won't have it, Joanne said, snapping 2 photos with her phone. But they might. Mr. Hayes managed a nervous smile. You seem remarkably calm, Mrs. Miller. She gave a small shrug. I was a nurse for 40 years. You learn how to keep your hands steady while you're cleaning up other people's messes. He laughed softly, uncertain. Fair enough. As he turned to leave, Joanne stopped him. One more thing. Who submitted the request? He checked the form. Lydia Miller. She even noted she was acting on behalf of the owner. Of course she did, Joanne murmured. When the appraiser drove away, she stood in the dust swirl his tires left behind, the sun sharp against her face. Then she turned, cane steady, and went inside. Her phone was already buzzing, Ellie naturally. Joanne answered. You have the gift of timing. Ellie's voice crackled with caffeine and indignation. What happened? Appraiser just left. Thought the house was being refinanced. Guess who scheduled him? Let me guess. Our favorite real estate witch? Joanne smiled faintly. And she used my signature again. I've got photos. Send them. I'll archive and forward to Martin. He's got a direct line to the fraud division. Joanne forwarded the images, then stared at the quiet kitchen for a long moment. She could almost hear her husband's voice. Don't let the small cuts bleed you out, Joe. The front door slammed open. Travis stormed in, sunburnt and furious. What the hell did you say to the appraiser? Joanne didn't flinch. The truth. You embarrassed us, he shouted, tossing his cap on the counter. He called Lydia at work, said you refused the service like some paranoid crazy person. Now she's furious, the bank's confused, and I look like an idiot. Joanne sipped her cooling coffee. Correction, she said evenly. You embarrassed yourselves. His jaw locked. You don't get to talk to me like that. We were trying to help. Her gaze was steady. Help yourselves, maybe. You don't help someone by stealing their roof from over their head. Travis opened his mouth, then closed it again. You've changed, he said finally, voice low. Joanne leaned on her cane, her silhouette framed by the window's bright light. No, I've just remembered who built this house. And it wasn't you. For a moment, he looked like a child again, caught, cornered, and scared of being seen for what he was. He muttered something under his breath and left, the door slamming so hard it rattled the glass. The sound echoed for a long time after he was gone. Joanne turned back to her coffee, lifted it, and finally drank it cold. Her phone chimed again, a text from Ellie. Martin's forwarding the documents to the county fraud investigator. Buckle up, Joe. Things are about to get interesting. Joanne smiled into her mug. Good, she whispered to the empty kitchen. It's time they learn what interesting really means. Outside, the desert wind picked up again, rattling the shutters like distant applause. The following week moved with strange quiet, like the breath before a storm. Joanne's days fell into their familiar rhythm. Coffee at dawn, watering the roses, sorting mail with the slow, deliberate patience of someone who'd stopped hurrying for anyone. But beneath that calm, something was shifting. It began with a call from Martin. Morning, Joe, he said, voice lower than usual. Got your photos. I escalated them to the county fraud unit yesterday. Joanne leaned on the counter, a smile ghosting at the edge of her lips. You work fast. I work righteously, he replied. The investigator's name is Dana Whitaker. You'll probably get a call. Just be honest, give her the documentation, and don't lose your temper. Who says I have one left to lose? He chuckled softly. That's what I like about you. By that afternoon, Joanne's phone rang again. Unknown number, local code. She answered. Mrs. Miller, this is Investigator Whitaker with the Washoe County Recorder's Office. We've received materials suggesting attempted deed fraud involving your property. Joanne's tone was composed, clipped. Yes, ma'am, I have originals, certified copies, and photographic evidence of forged signatures. Would you like the timestamps too? There was a brief pause on the line. You're thorough. 40 years as a nurse, Joanne said. If you miss details, people die. Whitaker laughed softly, then grew serious again. We'll need your statement and those photos. Could you email them tonight? They'll be in your inbox before dinner. Perfect. And Mrs. Miller, we'll be sending formal notices to the parties named in the documents. They'll be advised of an active inquiry. Joanne's lips curved into something not quite a smile. I imagine that'll ruin their evening plans. When she hung up, the house felt different, lighter somehow. Not safe, not yet, but defended. 2 mornings later, Travis found the envelope wedged into the screen door. The county seal glared up at him in heavy blue ink. Joanne watched from the kitchen window as he tore it open. His posture shifted as he read. First confusion, then disbelief, then fury. He stormed inside. What is this? He shoved the letter toward her. Joanne took it calmly, adjusted her glasses, and read aloud. Notice of potential property fraud under investigation. Standard procedure, really. Did you start this? He sputtered. She handed it back. No, Travis. Your actions did. He stared at her, jaw trembling between anger and fear. You're unbelievable. Funny, she said, turning back to her teacup. That's what the notary said when she filed my trust. He swore under his breath, crumpled the letter, and stormed out again. No slammed doors this time, just the sound of boots on gravel, and a man realizing the ground beneath him wasn't his to stand on. By noon, Lydia's phone call broke the silence. Joanne could hear her through the thin walls, sharp, clipped sentences filled with panic. What do you mean there's an investigation? Lydia hissed. No, I didn't forge anything. No, I'm not discussing this over the phone, for God's sake. The conversation ended with a choked curse and the slam of a bedroom door. Joanne sat at the kitchen table, watering can beside her, tending to a small pot of rosemary. She hummed softly, the same tune she used to sing to patients before difficult procedures. Her hands didn't shake. Ellie arrived later that afternoon, carrying iced tea and the grin of a woman who'd read every line of the day's gossip on Nextdoor. Your daughter-in-law's office HR just got wind of the investigation. Whole building knows. Joanne raised an eyebrow. That was fast. Faster than Botox wearing off, Ellie said. Apparently, word travels when a real estate agent gets flagged for potential document forgery. Joanne sipped her tea, eyes half closed in the warm sun. Actions have consequences. I warned them. Ellie chuckled. You've got the patience of a glacier, you know that? Joanne smiled faintly. Glaciers move slow, but they carve mountains. They sat together in the garden for a long while, the air full of desert hum and distant barking dogs. For the first time in weeks, Joanne felt her chest expand freely, her breaths no longer guarded. But when the mail came later that evening, she saw another envelope, unmarked, hand-delivered. Inside, one line written in Travis's messy scrawl. You didn't have to ruin us, Mom. Joanne stared at it for a long time, the paper trembling slightly in her grip. Then she folded it once, twice, and slipped it into the trash. Her roses glowed in the fading sunlight, thorns sharp, blooms heavy and alive. She whispered to them, I didn't ruin you, Travis. You did that all by yourself. From next door, Ellie called, Joe, you want company or quiet tonight? Joanne smiled, eyes still on her garden. Quiet's fine. It's the kind that means I've finally been heard. But deep inside, beneath the calm, she knew silence was only the intermission. The storm wasn't done with them yet. And tomorrow, someone in the county office would decide whether Travis and Lydia's names belonged on an official fraud ledger. She took another slow sip of her tea and waited for the thunder. By Thursday, the house felt hollow, not empty, but stripped of sound. The kind of quiet that used to mean peace now buzzed with resentment. Travis and Lydia had stopped speaking to Joanne except in clipped, logistical exchanges. Doors shut harder, footsteps landed heavier. Joanne didn't mind. Silence gave her room to remember. That morning, she sat at the dining table, pen in hand, notebook open. Across from her lay a single photo Ellie had salvaged from a garage box. A sun-faded picture of Joanne and her husband hammering the first beam of the house. She studied it, the younger version of herself mid-laugh. Her husband's hand steady on her shoulder. She began to write, what they took. The quilt with our initials. The photo of Nathan on his first day of kindergarten. My rocking chair. The smell of cinnamon in the mornings. My room, she paused. The last one stung differently. The kitchen door opened behind her, Lydia's perfume invading the air like an unwelcome guest. We're out of coffee, Lydia announced flatly, rummaging through a cabinet. Joanne didn't look up. There's instant in the pantry, Lydia scoffed. We're not animals. Travis walked in then, dark circles under his eyes, holding his phone like it contained a life raft. HR wants to talk to you, he said to Lydia. Lydia froze mid-motion. About the investigation? He shrugged, not meeting her eyes. They wouldn't say. Joanne closed her notebook and folded her hands over it. You two have made quite the impression on this town. Travis exhaled sharply. You think this is funny? No, Joanne said calmly. I think it's predictable. Lydia turned, glaring. You could have talked to us before going to the county. I didn't go to the county, Joanne replied evenly. The truth did. You just gave it the address. Lydia's lips thinned. We were trying to help you, keep the house from falling apart. Joanne stood leaning on her cane. Family doesn't evict their elders. It's that simple. Travis muttered, We weren't evicting you. Then why was my room repainted for guests? She asked quietly. Why were my things boxed up? Why was my name being erased one forged page at a time? The question hung heavy in the kitchen. Travis looked at the floor. Lydia crossed her arms, deflecting with a brittle laugh. You always twist things dramatic, Joanne. Maybe you're just not ready to admit you need us. Joanne's voice was gentle, almost pitying. I needed a new hip, not new airs. Neither spoke. The silence between them was a canyon now, one that couldn't be crossed with polite small talk or cheap apologies. She reached for the coffee pot, poured the last of it into her cup, and drained it slowly. "Dinner's on your own tonight," she said, her tone final. "I'm done cooking for people who eat everything but gratitude." The next morning, the smell of breakfast, or rather, the lack of it, filled the house. Joanne moved methodically around the kitchen, frying a single egg, buttering one slice of toast. One plate, one fork. Travis entered bleary-eyed, sniffing the air. "No bacon." "Didn't make any," she said, without turning. He frowned. "What about Lydia?" "She's got 2 hands and a fridge full of food." She set her single plate at the table, sat down, and ate in silence, while her son stood there, confused. Like a boy who'd just realized he wasn't the center of the world. Lydia appeared moments later, wrapped in a silk robe, scrolling on her phone. "So this is your new thing? Cooking just for yourself?" Joanne cut into her egg. "I decided to stop feeding what doesn't nourish me." Lydia's laugh was sharp. "God, you're melodramatic." Joanne smiled faintly. "And you're hungry." Lydia rolled her eyes and stormed off toward the garage, muttering something about performative martyrdom. Joanne didn't respond. She finished her breakfast, washed her single dish, and set it to dry. By late afternoon, Ellie texted a link. "Lydia Miller, real estate agent, trending in Reno local forum." Joanne opened it, curiosity mild. There it was, Lydia's public post. "Some parents don't appreciate the help they're given. It's sad when family turns toxic, but you can't let bitter people hold you back." Boundaries. Self-care. The comments were less sympathetic. "Sounds like elder abuse to me. So you helped by trying to take her house? Maybe the bitter one isn't your mom." Joanne chuckled softly, scrolling through the digital storm her daughter-in-law had created. The same woman who obsessed over image had now turned her own reputation into a cautionary tale. She typed a single private reply to Ellie. "Looks like they've started feeding themselves lies instead." Ellie's response came seconds later. "Let them choke on them." That evening, Joanne watered her roses again, the scent of soil and sunlight filling the air. Through the open window, she could hear Lydia and Travis arguing upstairs, low, frantic voices slicing the calm. She didn't need to hear the words. The tone told her enough. Fear had finally replaced arrogance. She smiled, whispering to her husband's memory, "You'd have liked this part." Then, faintly from her phone on the porch rail, another text appeared. Martin's name lighting the screen. "Call me. The investigation's moving faster than expected." Joanne's hand paused above the watering can. The water spilled over, darkening the soil at her feet. The storm, it seemed, was ready to arrive. By the weekend, Lydia's post had left the digital nest and sprouted claws. What began as a petty online rant spread through Reno like wildfire in high desert wind. Screenshots floated from neighborhood groups to local Facebook circles, then onto a subreddit titled Family Horror Stories. By Sunday, the comments weren't just gossip. They were condemnation. "If this is who I think it is, she's the agent from Sunrise Realty. Yikes. This sounds like elder abuse. Someone call the county." "Imagine bullying your own mother-in-law out of her home." Joanne didn't have to read them all. Ellie did that for her, gleefully narrating over morning tea. "She's trending," Ellie said, shaking her phone. "In a city this small, that's basically a death sentence." Joanne stirred honey into her cup. "Fame's a hungry thing. Eventually it eats the one who feeds it." "Truer words," Ellie muttered. "You think she even realizes what she's done?" "Not yet." Joanne looked out the window toward the yard. "But the county will." That same afternoon, Martin called. His voice carried a mix of disbelief and admiration. "Joe, I just saw it. Lydia's post is everywhere. The county attorney's office already forwarded me screenshots." Joanne kept her tone even. "Small town, big mouth." "Well, it's about to get bigger," he said. "They're using it as corroborating evidence. The attorney's opening a formal elder fraud inquiry." Joanne exhaled quietly. "That means subpoenas." "And interviews," Martin confirmed. Travis will get a summons first thing tomorrow. Lydia's next. The post gave them probable cause to pull property transfer records and her real estate license file. Fast work, Joanne said, almost to herself. Your daughter-in-law just posted her own confession, Martin said. It's like she mailed us the rope. Joanne smiled faintly. Then tie it neatly. Monday morning arrived with blue skies and dread. The first knock on the door wasn't Travis. It was a courier. He handed over a manila envelope addressed to Travis Miller. Official county seal. Joanne didn't open it. She didn't have to. 10 minutes later, Travis stumbled into the kitchen, envelope in hand, face pale. They're summoning me, he said, voice cracking. County Attorney's Office, Fraud Unit. Joanne poured her coffee. Good thing you've got experience with paperwork. He slammed the counter. You could stop this, Mom. Just tell them it's a misunderstanding. She looked up slowly. It's not. He stood there, chest heaving, anger collapsing into something smaller, fear, maybe. For a moment, he seemed to search her face for mercy. He didn't find any. When he left for his appointment, Joanne watched through the window as his truck disappeared down the street. The sound of its engine fading was the sweetest silence she'd heard in years. By noon, Ellie was back, waving her phone like a trophy. Guess whose license is suspended pending investigation? Joanne didn't blink. Lydia's. Ellie grinned. That's right. The Nevada Real Estate Division got a formal complaint. Someone submitted screenshots of her post with a note about pattern of elder exploitation. Martin? Joanne asked. Ellie nodded. He said it came straight from the county attorney's inbox. They're treating the post as an admission of intent. That's what happens when narcissists narrate their own downfall. Joanne set down her pruning shears. So it's official. As of this morning, yes. Ellie's smile softened. You did it, Joe. You really did it. Joanne looked toward her rose bushes. The desert wind was gentle that day, stirring the petals without harm. No, she said softly. They did it to themselves. I just stopped standing in the way. She knelt, pulling a few weeds from the soil, her movements slow but sure. Her hips still ached, but it felt earned now, like an old scar you keep to remember how strong you've become. That evening, Lydia came home early. Her car door slammed hard enough to rattle the windows. She marched inside, heels striking the tile like gunshots. You happy? She spat, eyes glassy. They suspended me. My firm's reviewing my contract. Everyone thinks I'm some kind of monster. Joanne looked up from her teacup. I didn't write your post, Lydia. You didn't have to. You just sat there letting everyone think the worst of us. Joanne's gaze was steady. They didn't think it. They read it. For a heartbeat, neither moved. Lydia's breathing hitched, a tremor breaking through the mask she'd worn for months. She looked ready to scream, but instead, she did something unexpected. She laughed. A broken, hysterical laugh. You really don't care what happens to us, do you? Joanne tilted her head slightly. I care that it stopped happening to me. Lydia's laughter stopped. Her eyes filled with something dangerous. Humiliation mixed with loss. She turned and fled upstairs without another word. Joanne sat back, the sound of the closing door echoing like punctuation at the end of a sentence she didn't have to finish. Outside, twilight deepened across Reno. Joanne stepped into her yard, the air cooling, the scent of roses heavy and sweet. The first stars blinked awake above the desert horizon. Her phone buzzed. A text from Martin. Attorneys filing formal charges this week. You'll be notified for statement review. Rest easy, Joe. She smiled, slipping the phone into her pocket. Rest was something she'd earned. As she watered the roses, she whispered, almost to herself, sometimes justice doesn't knock, it reposts. But the smile faded as headlights turned onto her street. Travis's truck, fast, too fast. The engine cut. A door slammed. Joanne tightened her grip on the watering can, water sloshing over her shoes. The storm she'd been waiting for had finally arrived at her doorstep. The storm didn't come with thunder. It came with the sound of Travis's boots pounding down the hallway and the splinter of his voice breaking through the calm. Joanne didn't flinch. She stayed on the porch, watering her roses, watching the spray of water glint in the fading sunset. When she finally turned, Travis stood in the doorway, red-faced, breathing hard, a folded document clutched in his hand. "You did this," he said. "You ruined us." Joanne tilted her head. "Ruined you? You might want to be specific." "Dear..." He threw the papers onto the porch table. The top page bore the county seal, trust filing confirmation. "Lydia found it in the records this morning," he spat. "You locked the house in a trust. We can't sell it, can't refinance, can't do anything." Joanne picked up the document, smoothing it like she was straightening a recipe card. "That's right. It's protected now." Lydia appeared behind him, eyes bloodshot, makeup smeared. In her hand was another file, thinner but more dangerous. The printed copy of the trust agreement Martin had sent her as a part of the county inquiry. She dropped it onto the table. "We read it. Every clause. You made yourself trustee. You named a hospice foundation as beneficiary. You made sure we get nothing." Joanne poured the last of her watering can into a flower bed. "Something interesting, is it?" Lydia's voice cracked. "You planned this, from the start." Joanne finally faced them fully, her cane tapping once against the porch floor. "I survived hip surgery, Lydia. I can survive greed." Travis stepped forward, face twisted. "You think you're teaching us a lesson? You've humiliated us in front of the whole town." "No," Joanne said quietly. "You did that all on your own. I just made sure the paperwork caught up to reality." Lydia grabbed the trust papers, flipping through them again, hands shaking. "You named a charity, for God's sake. Some hospice you barely know." "I know them better than I know the two of you right now." Her tone wasn't cruel, it was calm. And that calm unnerved them more than anger ever could. Travis's fist hit the porch railing. "You're cutting your own family out," Joanne met his eyes. "Family isn't blood, Travis. It's who shows up without asking for a signature." For a moment, none of them spoke. The wind shifted through the yard, carrying the smell of dust and distant rain. Lydia's fingers crumpled the edge of the trust papers, her voice shaking. "You can't just erase us." Joanne's gaze didn't waver. "I didn't erase you. I just stopped pretending you were written in ink." An hour later, the locksmith's van pulled into the driveway. The man, a polite, soft-spoken local, greeted Joanne with a nod and got to work. Every lock on the house was replaced, one by one, the metallic clicks echoing through the night. Lydia followed him room to room, her protest dissolving into disbelief. "You can't just change the locks on your own son." Joanne leaned on her cane in the hall. "I can, when he's not my tenant, not my caretaker, and certainly not my heir." Travis stood by the stairs, shoulders slumped. "You've lost your mind," Joanne's eyes softened. "No, I found my boundary." The locksmith finished within the hour. Joanne signed the receipt, thanked him, and handed him an envelope with cash and a slice of lemon cake Ellie had dropped off earlier. When he left, the porch light flickered on automatically, bathing everything in a warm, protective glow. Moments later, a police cruiser rolled up to the curb. The two officers stepped out, nodding politely. One was young, the other older, and both looked uncomfortable in the way people do when called to supervise family disasters. Joanne met them on the porch. "Evening, officers. They'll be collecting their belongings tonight." The older officer nodded. "Yes, ma'am. We'll stay until it's finished." Inside, the house felt smaller than ever. Lydia stomped through the rooms, gathering clothes, shoes, framed pictures she'd added during her redesign. Travis moved slower, avoiding Joanne's gaze. When he passed the kitchen, he paused by the counter, fingers brushing the worn edge of the table he'd eaten at since childhood. "Where are we supposed to go?" he asked quietly. Joanne didn't look up from the paperwork she was sorting. "Somewhere you can afford," he flinched, then turned away. By the time they loaded the last box into the truck, the desert air had turned sharp and cool. Lydia refused to say goodbye. Travis hesitated at the driver's side door, glancing back once at the windows glowing with lamplight. His mother stood framed inside, the picture of quiet, immovable resolve. The truck's engine started. Headlights swept across the yard, illuminating the roses one last time before fading into the darkness. Joanne locked the door behind them, tested it twice, and leaned her cane against the wall. The house hummed softly, its stillness finally peaceful again. She exhaled, slow and steady. For the first time in months, the air smelled like lavender polish and memory. From outside, the older officer called through the screen, "Everything all right now, ma'am?" Joanne smiled faintly. "Everything's finally mine." But when she turned, her reflection caught in the hallway mirror, tired eyes, steady hand. She knew it wasn't victory she felt. It was release. Still, release could be enough. For now. She reached for her phone and typed a short message to Ellie. "They're gone. Lock's changed. I'll sleep tonight." The reply came seconds later. "You earned it. Tomorrow, pie on my porch." Joanne looked out the window one last time, where the taillights had vanished into the desert road. Her roses swayed in the wind, unbothered, and she whispered to them, "Let them learn what it's like to live without roots." Morning came slow and clean. The desert light crept over the rooftops, washing away the dust of last night's departure. Joanne stood by the kitchen window, coffee in hand, watching as a city maintenance truck passed by, its tires whispering across the pavement. It was quiet again, real quiet this time. She'd almost forgotten what peace sounded like. Outside, the curb still bore faint tire marks, where Travis's truck had idled too long. The police tape, briefly hung across the gate as protocol, was gone. The air was still, except for a few neighbors pretending not to stare as they watered their lawns. Across the street, Mrs. Ortega lifted her chin in a silent nod of acknowledgement. Next door, Ellie waved with her mug raised high, her version of a salute. The neighborhood had seen everything. The moving boxes, the officers, Lydia's trembling hands, Travis's hunched shoulders. No one said a word, but their silence carried judgment. Reno had a way of remembering the stories people tried to hide. Joanne turned back to her kitchen, letting the curtain fall. Her house looked lived in again, not staged. A mug on the counter, a newspaper open to the crossword, the faint smell of lemon oil drifting from the wood floors she'd polished herself the night before. One by one, she began unwrapping the photo frames from the storage boxes. Her wedding photo went first, center of the mantel, then her son's first school picture, his hair sticking up like a stubborn flame. Then the one of Nathan, 8 years old, missing a front tooth, clutching a baseball glove too big for his hands. Each frame returned to its rightful spot with a soft, deliberate touch. The walls seemed to breathe again, reclaiming their history. When she reached the last box, a smaller frame fell forward, glass cracked at the corner. Her husband's smile looked warped behind it, like he was caught between worlds. Joanne traced his outline gently. "It's fixed now," she murmured. "Took me long enough." A knock came at the back door, quick, familiar. Ellie let herself in, paint-stained overalls and 2 cups of iced coffee in hand. "I brought reinforcements," she announced. Behind her came Nathan, awkward and gangly at 15, a roller brush balanced on his shoulder. "Grandma," he grinned. "Dad said I could come help paint." Joanne blinked, startled. "He said that?" Nathan nodded. "He said, 'It's your house now.' Guess he meant it." Ellie set down the coffee and nudged Joanne's shoulder. "See? Even the prodigal offspring can recognize a lost cause." Joanne smiled faintly. "Let's get started before I change my mind." They went down the hall to her old bedroom, the one Lydia had sterilized into a magazine spread. The walls were still a cold hospital white, stripped of the warmth it once held. "Looks like a rental unit," Ellie muttered. "Not for long," Joanne said. Nathan cracked open a can of bright yellow paint. The color was warm, like morning sunlight after a long storm. He dipped the roller, laughing as it splattered on his sneakers. I'm telling Dad you made me do this manual labor, Joanne chuckled. Tell him I'm billing him for emotional damages. They worked in companionable rhythm, Ellie cutting neat edges with a brush, while Nathan filled the broad spaces, the air filled with the scent of fresh paint and small laughter. With each stroke, the sterile past peeled away, replaced by color that felt alive. When they finished the first coat, Joanne stepped back, breath catching slightly. It's the same shade as our old kitchen, she whispered. Ellie wiped her hands on a rag. Of course it is. You're rebuilding more than walls, Joe. Joanne leaned on her cane, eyes tracing the wet brushstrokes that caught the light. You don't just reclaim deeds, Ellie said softly beside her. You reclaim dignity. Joanne's lips curved into a quiet, knowing smile. Dignity's the hardest house to build. For a long moment, the three of them stood there, grandmother, neighbor, grandson, bathed in the glow of something that looked a lot like restoration. Outside, the sound of a delivery truck passed, then faded. The world was moving on, but Joanne no longer felt like it was leaving her behind. She looked at Nathan, his hands streaked with yellow. Go wash up. There's pie in the fridge. Ellie's favorite, apple cinnamon. Nathan grinned and bolted toward the kitchen. When he was gone, Ellie turned to her. You okay? Joanne exhaled slowly. For the first time, yes. But there's still one thing left to do. Ellie raised an eyebrow. What's that? Joanne's gaze shifted toward the garage door, the place where boxes still sat, labeled Mom's stuff, some unopened since the day she came home from surgery. She straightened her shoulders. It's time I opened what they tried to bury. Ellie gave a small, approving nod. Want help? Joanne smiled. No, this one's mine. She reached for the light switch, the bulb flickering to life as she descended the steps. Dust hung in the air like memory waiting to be claimed. Behind her, the faint sound of Nathan's laughter mixed with the creak of the floorboards and the desert wind outside. And as Joanne lifted the first box lid, sunlight from the small garage window cut through the dimness, falling directly onto a framed photo of her husband holding a hammer, the same day they broke ground on the house. Her eyes softened. The house they built was hers again. And this time, no one was taking it away. The courthouse smelled faintly of toner and disinfectant, the scent of bureaucracy and closure. Joanne moved carefully through the lobby, her cane tapping against the marble, each step sure but unhurried. The sunlight filtering through the tall glass windows caught the silver in her hair, turning it momentarily to light. Ellie walked beside her, her purse clinking with too many keys and her usual commentary. I swear, Joe, every time I'm in a courthouse, I half expect to see one of my ex-husbands. This place attracts men who think I do is a short-term lease. Joanne smirked. Then let's make sure today's paperwork lasts longer than theirs did. Martin met them at the end of the corridor, standing beside a counter stacked with manila folders and a single pot of wilting ivy. His smile deepened the lines around his eyes. You made it, he said, holding out a form thick enough to demand respect. Final trust confirmation. Once this is signed, filed, and stamped, that house is permanently under your guardianship. No appeals, no loopholes. Ellie nudged Joanne's shoulder. Ready to seal the deal, trustee of steel? Joanne took the pen from Martin's hand. It felt heavier than she remembered, a good kind of weight, the kind that meant something. She set the papers on the counter, adjusted her glasses, and began to sign. Each stroke of her name was slow, deliberate, as if carving her will into the world itself. When she finished, Martin took the document, aligned it beneath the courthouse stamp, and pressed down hard. The sound of the seal echoed across the quiet office, an authoritative thunk that vibrated through her chest. He looked up, satisfied. Permanent record, he said softly. Your home's future just became untouchable. For a long moment, Joanne didn't move. She looked down at the stamp, permanent record, the red ink still wet, the impression crisp against the paper. Her husband's name beside hers, the same pairing that had built walls, raised a roof, and outlasted greed. Martin cleared his throat gently. You want me to file this myself? Joanne met his eyes. You've done enough, but thank you, Martin. For everything. He nodded, slipping the document into a plastic sleeve. It's an honor, Joe. Not every day someone wins their life back on paper. When they stepped outside, the desert sun was merciless but clean. Joanne blinked against the brightness, sliding her sunglasses on. The heat wrapped around her like an embrace she didn't mind. Her hip, though still stiff, moved easier now. Maybe it was the therapy. Maybe it was the weight she'd finally laid down. Ellie caught up beside her, squinting at the sky. Well, that's that. You're officially your own fortress. Joanne smiled, leaning on her cane. Feels more like I finally got the keys to my own peace. They reached the car, parked crooked in the courthouse lot. Ellie tossed her purse into the back seat and climbed behind the wheel. You know, she said, most people celebrate with champagne, but I'm thinking pie. Joanne laughed, the sound low and genuine. Pie sounds perfect, Ellie grinned. Good, because I've got apple crumble waiting at home. And before you ask, yes, it's the real buttercrust. None of that low-fat nonsense. As they drove through Reno's quiet streets, the world felt softened. Buildings older than their paint, wind sweeping up tiny spirals of sand across the asphalt. Joanne rolled down her window. The smell of sagebrush drifted in. Ellie kept talking, half teasing, half relieved. You realize you've outmaneuvered your own family and the county bureaucracy. That deserves its own holiday. Maybe we'll call it Joanne Day. Joanne chuckled. If you do, make sure the banks stay open. They'll need something to do while I'm at home not signing anything. Ellie howled with laughter. Amen to that. They pulled into Ellie's driveway, the same one where Joanne had parked 100 times before, back when things were uncertain, when the house across the fence didn't yet feel like a victory reclaimed. Now it did. As Ellie disappeared into the kitchen to cut the pie, Joanne sat on the porch swing, letting it sway slowly. The slice of sky above was enormous, painted in gold and rose. The breeze tugged at her hair, gentle, familiar. Ellie returned with 2 plates, handing one over with a smirk. To victories written in ink and served warm, she said. Joanne took a bite, closing her eyes as the crust flaked against her tongue. Pie tastes best without parasites, Ellie added dryly. Joanne laughed, nearly choking. You'll make a terrible inscription on a greeting card. That's why I don't send them, Ellie said, clinking her fork against Joanne's plate. But I do show up for dessert. For a long while, they ate in companionable silence, the kind that didn't need to be filled. Across the fence, Joanne's house glowed under the setting sun, its windows golden, alive. The roses in the yard caught the last light, like 1,000 tiny embers. Joanne watched them, her expression peaceful but alert, like a sentry who's earned her rest but still honors her post. When Ellie reached for another slice, Joanne whispered to the evening air, "He'd have liked this ending." Ellie heard but didn't reply. She didn't have to. The courthouse seal still fresh in her mind. Joanne exhaled slowly and smiled. For the first time in years, her name meant safety again. The letter arrived on a Monday, plain white envelope, no return address, Travis's handwriting barely holding itself together. Joanne recognized it instantly, the familiar slant of guilt dressed up as apology. She didn't open it. She turned it once in her hand, the paper soft from having been handled too many times before it reached her. Then she reached for a black pen, drew one clean line across the seal, and wrote in neat, unwavering script, "Return to sender." The mailbox clicked shut with finality. No drama, no tears, just silence, the kind she'd earned. By Wednesday afternoon, Ellie was on the porch, reading the paper and sipping iced coffee while Joanne trimmed her roses. "Heard anything from the county yet?" she asked. Joanne wiped her hands on her gardening gloves. "Not yet. But Martin said the investigator filed her final report. It's closing this week." Ellie grinned. "About time. The longer that mess drags, the more it smells." Joanne smirked. Some things are better left sealed in official envelopes. The sound of gravel crunching interrupted them. A familiar blue pickup rolled to a stop at the end of Joanne's driveway. Travis. Ellie straightened in her chair. Speak of the devil, and he downshifts. Joanne didn't move. She clipped one last rose stem, letting it fall into the basket. The door of the truck slammed, and her son emerged, tired, thinner, but still carrying that restless anger like a coat he didn't know how to take off. He called out, voice cracking under the weight of something that wasn't quite fury anymore. Mom, please, we need to talk. Joanne didn't answer. She placed her clippers on the porch rail, lifted her cane, and turned to face him. There's nothing left to say, she said evenly. Travis took a step closer, desperation bleeding through his tone. You can't just cut me off forever. Lydia's gone, her license got pulled. I've lost work, and… Joanne raised a hand. You forged my name. You let her turn my home into a transaction. That was the talk you should have had, with a conscience, not me. He swallowed hard. You're my mother. And you stopped being my son when you treated me like collateral. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. The stillness between them was unbearable. Just the dry whir of cicadas and the soft rattle of wind through the fence. Then the patrol car rolled up. The same officer from the lock change night stepped out, hat in hand. Afternoon, Mrs. Miller, he said gently. Everything all right? Joanne nodded once. Everything's fine, officer. My son was just leaving. Travis turned, voice rising. You called them again? I didn't have to, she said. The restraining order speaks for itself. The officer cleared his throat politely. Sir, you're not supposed to be on the property. Travis looked at her one last time, eyes hollow. You really won, didn't you? Joanne's answer was soft but razor sharp. No, Travis, I just stopped losing. The officer guided him back toward the truck. Gravel spit under the tires as the vehicle turned down the street and vanished into the desert road. Ellie exhaled slowly. You okay? Joanne nodded, eyes still fixed on the empty space where the truck had been. Yes, that was the talk I didn't have, and never needed to. The next morning, Martin's name appeared on her phone. It's done, he said, voice warm with satisfaction. County closed the fraud inquiry. Records cleared in your favor. The trust stands. Everything in your name is ironclad. Joanne closed her eyes, letting the relief settle quietly instead of exploding. And Lydia? He hesitated. The state revoked her license permanently. Document forgery, false representation. She won't work in real estate again. Joanne exhaled. Good, maybe she'll finally learn what ownership means. Martin chuckled. You should have been a lawyer. I prefer scalpel to pen, she said dryly. Cleaner incisions. That evening, Ellie appeared with 2 mugs of coffee instead of wine. They sat on Joanne's porch, while the desert sun dissolved into coral and violet. The air smelled faintly of roses and cooling stone. Ellie raised her mug. To justice. Better when it's notarized. Joanne clinked hers against it, smiling. And served warm, Ellie smirked. You sure you don't want to gloat online like Lydia did? I could make you an account. A revenge with roses. Joanne laughed, shaking her head. No need. The records speak louder than hashtags. For a while, they watched the horizon fade into twilight. Across the yard, the porch light flickered on, steady as a heartbeat. Forgive him? Ellie asked finally, her voice gentle. Joanne looked down into her cup, watching the reflection of the light ripple. Forgiveness is optional, she said. Ownership isn't. The quiet that followed wasn't heavy. It was earned. The desert wind moved through the roses, brushing their petals like a benediction. Somewhere down the street, a coyote yipped, sharp and distant, as if signaling that the story was over and the night could finally rest. Joanne leaned back, her cane resting against the railing, and looked toward her house. Her name, her deed, her peace. Then, almost to herself, she whispered, he'd have liked this part too. But her smile didn't linger long. A letter fluttered across the porch in the wind. Another envelope, blank, caught against her shoe. She bent, picked it up and turned it over. The return address wasn't Travis's this time. It was the county recorder's office. She frowned, breaking the seal. The letter began, "Mrs. Miller, please contact us regarding a new inquiry related to your property trust. Possible outside claims submitted." Joanne's hand stilled on the paper. The night wind shifted. And just like that, peace became something to defend again. The letter from the county hadn't been bad news, just a request for consultation. Someone else, another senior, had nearly fallen for a similar scheme. They wanted Joanne's insight. It wasn't trouble. It was an invitation. 3 months later, she stood inside the same courthouse where she'd reclaimed her life, now wearing a volunteer badge that read, "Community Outreach, Property Protection for Seniors." The title felt odd at first, but she wore it like she wore her cane, with pride disguised as practicality. The outreach office was a modest room off the main hall, filled with donated chairs and the faint hum of an old coffee machine. On her desk sat a neat stack of pamphlets. Know your deed, know your rights. Joanne arranged them in even rows, the way she used to sort medical charts. Across from her, a woman in her 70s wrung her hands nervously. "My grandson says the bank needs me to sign something," she whispered. "But I don't remember applying for a loan." Joanne smiled gently. "Then you didn't. And you won't sign a thing until we check the paperwork together." Her voice had the same calm firmness she'd once used to quiet frightened patients. It worked now, too. The woman exhaled, shoulders loosening. "Thank you," she said. I didn't think anyone cared." Joanne squeezed her hand. "We care. You built your home. You get to keep it." When the woman left, Martin appeared in the doorway, leaning on the frame. His tie was crooked, his eyes softer than usual. "You've got a knack for this," he said. "I used to fight infections," Joanne replied, straightening a stack of forms. "Now I fight bad paperwork. Fewer gloves, same satisfaction." He laughed, stepping inside. "I'm retiring next month. The county wants someone to take my place on the advisory board." She blinked. "And you're looking at her?" He shrugged. "You already do half the work. Might as well give you the title." For a moment, she just stared at him, the weight of his offer settling in. The thought of stepping into his role, of protecting others with the same laws that once protected her, felt bigger than she'd expected. She smiled slowly. "All right, Martin, but only if you promise to leave me your parking spot." He grinned. "Deal." That evening, Joanne returned home to the scent of roses and the hum of sprinklers. Nathan was on the porch, backpack open, scribbling into a notebook. "Homework?" she asked. "Sort of." He looked up, grinning. "It's for an essay contest at school. Someone who changed my life." Joanne raised an eyebrow. "And you're writing about your math teacher." He laughed. "Funny." "No, Grandma, it's you. Title's My Grandma Rebuilt Her House." Her heart caught for a second. "That's quite a headline." "I mean it," he said, flipping the notebook around so she could see the first paragraph. "It's not just about the house, though. It's about how you stood up for yourself. Dad says he wishes he'd listened sooner." Joanne looked away, pretending to fuss with a rose stem. "Your dad's finding his own way." Nathan nodded. They moved. Out of state. Lydia got some job in Arizona, and he's doing contract work. He said to tell you he's okay. Joanne's hand stilled on the rosebush. "Good," she said finally. "Distance can be a kind of healing." Nathan grinned. "He also said to tell you the roses look great in the pictures I send." That made her laugh, a soft, tired laugh, but real. "Then make sure they stay that way. They're stubborn things, roses. They thrive if you don't let anyone trample them." Weeks turned into months. Joanne's garden didn't fade when summer waned. She kept it blooming with year-round devotion. Yellow roses, white lilies, lavender sprigs that perfumed the air even in winter. Neighbors began stopping by with questions, then with cuttings of their own. The once silent house became a small, steady hub of life again. Coffee cups, shared tools, small laughter over big lessons. Ellie called it Joanne's court in the court of common sense. Joanne didn't disagree. On the first cool morning of October, she sat on the porch with a blanket across her knees, reading Nathan's finished essay in print, his handwriting messy but proud. My grandma rebuilt her house, not just the walls, but everything inside her that people tried to take. Some people fix things. Others make sure they never break again. She's both. Her eyes blurred before she could reach the last line. The roses swayed in the autumn wind, their petals whispering like applause. From across the fence, Ellie called, "Hey, Advocate Miller? County Hall wants you to talk at that senior safety luncheon next week. I told them you charge in pie slices." Joanne smiled through the wet in her eyes. Then they'd better bring whipped cream. She looked out across her yard, the sunlight catching the deed framed above the fireplace inside. For the first time in her life, the word owner didn't feel like a label. It felt like a legacy. And as she leaned back, letting the desert breeze carry the scent of her flowers, she whispered to the earth beneath her feet, "I kept it, love, for both of us." The wind rose, warm and steady, rustling through the roses like an answer. It took her nearly a year to feel ready. The house had been fully restored by then, not renovated, not staged, but restored. The walls carried laughter again. The kitchen smelled of cinnamon and coffee. The roses outside were still thriving, impossibly vivid against the November air. And the mantel, now polished and bare, waited for one final thing. Joanne stood before it on a quiet afternoon, holding the photograph she'd found buried in the garage months ago. The one of her and her husband, sunburnt and laughing, hammer poised mid-swing during the house's construction. The frame had been mended, the crack sealed clean, but the faint line remained, a ghost of damage that didn't need to be hidden. The late afternoon sun streamed through the living room window, hitting the glass just right. It lit up his smile first, then hers, and finally the faint reflection of the woman she'd become. Older, steadier, unbroken. She took a step back and hung it on the nail above the fireplace. The click of the frame settling into place echoed like punctuation, the final sentence to a long, hard chapter. Her husband's eyes seemed to meet hers through the glass. "It's done," she whispered. "We built it once. I built it again." Behind her, the sound of laughter broke the stillness. Ellie was the first through the door, balancing 2 steaming pies and announcing herself like a parade grand marshal. "Your porch is starting to look like a bakery, Joe. One of these days, I'm going to start charging admission." Nathan trailed close behind, his backpack slung over one shoulder. "Grandma, you didn't wait for us," he said, mock offended. "You hung it without ceremony," Joanne smiled. "You missed your chance to hold the level straight." Ellie set the pies down and joined her in front of the fireplace. For a long moment, none of them spoke. The picture glowed softly in the amber light. The couple inside it immortalized mid-laughter, 2 young dreamers frozen at the beginning of everything that came after. Ellie exhaled, voice gentle. "Looks right at home," Joanne nodded. "It always was. It just needed to be claimed again." Nathan came up beside her, peering at the photo. "You were my age there, weren't you?" "Close enough," she said with a small grin. "But don't get any ideas about building your own house yet. Start with mowing the lawn." He rolled his eyes and hugged her from the side, his warmth grounding her more than he'd ever know. "You still have everything that matters, Grandma." She squeezed his arm. "And now it's protected." On the mantel below the photo sat a single framed document, the certified copy of her deed. Edges crisp, stamp bright red. It wasn't hidden away in a safe anymore. It belonged in the open, next to a vase of yellow roses and a small candle that flickered like memory made visible. Ellie noticed it and chuckled. "Leaving it out for decoration?" Joanne's smile deepened. "For education. Let anyone who visits remember who this house belongs to." Ellie snorted. "That's a better deterrent than any security system." The smell of pie drifted through the air, apple and cinnamon, a scent stitched into the house's history. They carried plates to the dining table, sunlight spilling across the old wood. The laughter came easy now, unforced and full. As they ate, neighbors filtered in, Mrs. Ortega with her shy granddaughter, Mr. Dunn from down the block with his cane and bad jokes. The room filled slowly, the way light fills cracks, everyone talking, sharing, tasting. No one mentioned the past. They didn't have to. The house itself seemed to hum again, alive in a way it hadn't been since before the surgery. Later, when everyone had gone and the dishes were stacked in the sink, Joanne stood once more before the mantel. The photo gleamed in the lamplight, her husband's grin eternal, her own reflection overlapping his. The roses outside rustled against the window, and the desert wind moved through them like a familiar whisper. She picked up her cane, turned off the light, and said aloud, to the empty room, to the photograph, to the years it took to come back to herself. After surgery, I walked into my own house and saw my pictures gone, my room reclaimed. So I reclaimed the deed before they even knew it was mine again. The house didn't answer, but it didn't need to. The proof was in the walls, the roses, and the woman standing in the quiet, finally whole, finally home.